Good morning. It is good to see you today. Thanks so much for being here. Would you join me, please, at Matthew chapter 6? Matthew chapter 6. Some of the events of the last week or so have caused me to think about folks who do really good things, who serve others and help others do really good things, but seek no attention for it. They do good, but they're not doing good in order to get something from doing good. Been thinking about that a lot this week, and that kind of leads us to Matthew chapter 6, and so I thought we would spend a little time there this morning as we begin our worship today. In Matthew chapter 6, beginning in verse 1, Jesus is speaking, and he says, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed by them. Otherwise, you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven." That is a simple, straightforward, easy to understand statement, but it's just full of good information for us. First of all, beware of practicing your righteousness. There is an assumption that there's an understood aspect of Christianity, and that is that it will be practiced, that good things will occur. It is not that Christianity is all about knowing something. It is about knowing and then doing. Christianity is a pursuit of actually doing things. Jesus understands that, and as he talks about the nature of the kingdom, he says, beware of practicing your righteousness. That is the righteousness that you're supposed to be doing, the things that you're already supposed to do. Beware of doing that before men in order to be noticed by them. That's an interesting thing, especially when you go back just a little bit. Flip over back to chapter 5 in your Bible. In chapter 5, when he says in verse 14, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men in such a way," now listen to this, "that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven." It seems like, if you'll forgive me for using the term, it seems like a bit of an inconsistency there. Let your light shine so people will see it, and then just a little bit later, beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be seen by them. So we've got to reconcile that. We have to understand the one and the other together. We can't say, well, we're just going to go with this one. We're going to go with the Matthew 5 one and discard the Matthew 6 one. We can't do that. We can't say we like the Matthew 6 one, so we're not going to listen to the Matthew 5 one. We have to be able to put those together and understand those together. And so you get to do that. You get first shot at reconciling Matthew 5:14, "Let your light shine before men that they see your good works," and Matthew 6:1, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before men to be noticed by them." How do you reconcile that? How do you work those two passages out? They're both instructions given specifically by Jesus about the nature of the kingdom's citizen. So how do you work those out? How do you come to terms with that? Yes, ma'am. You know, that's just perfectly awesome. Taylor has summed it up very nicely for us. It really gets down to motive. It gets down to why we're doing what we're doing. That's it. Are we supposed to do good? Say it out loud where I can really hear you. Yes, we are supposed to do good. We're supposed to practice righteousness. We're supposed to do good. Is that good supposed to be recognizable? Yes, it is. It's supposed to be identifiable. Something that can be seen. Let your light so shine before men that they see your good works. Okay? So it's supposed to be seen. What we get to, and the difference that Taylor mentioned, is the motive behind it and what the doer of the deed is really after. So in Matthew 5, look at verse 16. "Let your light so shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works." The last phrase of that. "And glorify your Father who is in heaven." That's the thing. That's what Taylor's talking about. It's not that they see our good works and glorify us. It's not that they see the good and say, "Ooh, look at you. You are good." It's that they see what you do, and that then shows them more about the Father who is in heaven. And that, of course, is why Jesus said, back over in chapter 6, to be noticed by them, to be seen by them. That's the challenge that we have. And that's an internal thing, not an external thing. So don't ever say, well, I'm going to do good, but I'm going to do good so secretly that no one will ever see it. That's really kind of using it as an excuse to not do much of anything. Now, Jesus is going to get to verses 2 and 3 of chapter 6 and give us a little bit more information about that. But I want you to understand, first of all, that you and I are supposed to be about the business of doing good works. Titus talked about that and mentioned that our people are supposed to be doing good works. The motive is the thing. You have any comments about that up to this point? Yes, sir. Yeah, that's really good what Brother Bailey said, that the religious leaders of their day had trouble with doing it to be seen, but not doing it because it was the right thing to do. What is the chapter where he deals with that later on in Matthew in great detail and in very specific ways? Matthew chapter 23. Remember the woe section? In Matthew chapter 23, that's where he says, do what they say, but don't do what they do. Well, why not? Well, they're saying the right things, but they're not doing the right things, and what they're really after is attention for themselves. That's really what they want. Instead of wanting to point people to God, they wanted to point people to themselves. Why would that be? Why would you want to do that? Why would anybody want to point folks or direct people's attention to themselves instead of to God? Why would you do that? Why would the religious leaders of their day do it, and why would people do it today? Praise and money, yes. Can we add one to that that's probably included in that, but some degree of control, some degree of power, yeah. That's why that happens. It happened then, Jesus saw it, Jesus dealt with it. It happens today. And so what he says at the very beginning of Matthew about the nature of the kingdom citizen, he brings up toward the end, and the whole idea there is, here's a good example of what not to do. He has told us what we should do, here's what we should not do. So all of it gets back to bringing glory to God and not glory to self. That's what it is. Don't ever use, though, what Jesus says in Matthew 6, 1, 2, 3, and 4, to say, well, I'm just not going to do anything, because if I do something, then that might attract attention. And if that attracts attention, then I've done something wrong. That's not what he's saying. He's getting to motive. So let's read verse 2, 3, and 4 of Matthew chapter 6. He says, so when you give to the poor, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be honored by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But when you give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving will be in secret, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Okay, verse 1, he makes the proclamation. Here's the rule, here's the standard, here's the nature of the kingdom citizen. Then he goes through 3 different examples of that. The first example is the giving to the poor. So if you have a King James version, it may say giving alms. It's being generous, giving to the poor. The second example, verse 5, when you pray. And he says, when you pray, don't stand on the street corner to get everybody's attention. Don't go out and say, okay, everybody, I'm going to pray now, so y'all watch me. Don't do that. He deals with it. The third thing is when you fast, verse 16. When you fast, don't put on a gloomy face as the hypocrites do. Don't walk around and say, I'm fasting this week. It's terrible. It's just killing me. I can't believe I'm doing it, but I'm doing it for God because I love God. But look at me, I'm fasting. Don't do that. That's what he says. Those 3 different things. The first one there about giving to the poor, about being generous. He says in verse 2, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets. And the first thing that pops into my mind about that is we would never do that, would we? We would never go around and say, I've been very generous this week to people, or throughout my life I've been very generous. Let me tell you how generous I have been. Would we ever do that? We would never do that, would we? Oh, only on Facebook. Yeah, only on Facebook. When we do good, that needs to hit Facebook pretty quick so folks know. The fact of the matter is, we do sometimes want people to know how generous we are, how good we are to others. We want them to know. And the fact that we want others to know is the problem. That is the problem. Is generosity commanded? Absolutely. Is it understood and assumed? Well, it is here. No question about it. Generosity is a part of being a Christian. Generosity so others will see it is not what the kingdom citizen does. And sometimes that's hard for us. Sometimes we want the attention that comes with it. Just a little bit. Don't need a lot, just a little bit. So we're not going to sound a trumpet. We're not going to do that. We're not going to have this great big proclamation. And no, we're not going to put it on Facebook because, well, that's sounding a trumpet. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to tell the people we're real close to. We're just going to tell a few people about how good we are, about how generous we are, about how we, gave to the poor. Most probably a reference to people you don't even know. That kind of generosity. I was generous toward people I didn't even know. Look at that. Isn't that great? The problem is we want recognition. What does Jesus say in verse 2 about recognition and reward? Do what? What does he say in verse 2 about it? In verse 2. That's it. You got it. You got your recognition. When you blew the horn and told everybody about it, whatever resulted from that, that's what you get. So what does that mean you do not get? Okay, a reward in heaven, say it a different way. I'm doing what Zach tells me not to do and asking you to read my mind. You don't get any recognition from God. You get no recognition from God for having done what you were asked to do, required to do, but did incorrectly. And that makes it a very futile kind of an effort, doesn't it? The only thing we get is some temporary, and it is temporary because, let's be honest, people are not nearly as impressed with the good things we do as they act like they are. We don't get a whole lot out of that, really and truly. In fact, if we become known as someone who's always blowing the trumpet, we're not getting much at all. Because people immediately disregard that and go, there he goes again, and that's it. That's all we get. We get really nothing. But we think it's something because we want the attention. And what he's saying is, whatever you got out of that, verse 2, that is your reward. For having done the good, yes. And for having publicized it, yes. Anything at the end of verse 2? It is harmful to the cause. It is against the nature of the kingdom. The kingdom is not self-serving. The kingdom is self-sacrifice. It is against the nature of the kingdom. If we want a clearer picture of it all, we might think about how Jesus conducted himself. It's always good to do that, especially when he's teaching us about how to live our lives. He did not come here for himself. He came here at the expense of self. Everything he did was at the expense of self. Everything, not most things. And so as he speaks, as he gives us this instruction, he's not speaking hypocritically as I would when I say, okay, here's what we need to do. I haven't always done that correctly. He did that correctly. And so as we study through it, we need to understand Jesus knows what he's talking about, and it is possible for us to live our lives that way as kingdom citizens. Keep our mouths shut about the good that we do. If we open our mouths about it, then the result of that is the reward. Now, verse 3. This is where he tells us how to fix the problem. Verse 3 solves the problem for us. He says in verse 3, but when you do give to the poor, again, an understood aspect of Christianity, you're going to be generous. When you do give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. And why is that? Well, verse 4, so that your giving will be in secret, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. I talked about this a couple of years ago in the what was then the middle school class. Cannon was in there, some other folks were in there, and we talked about not letting your left hand know what your right hand was doing. And that's an interesting, kind of a strange concept, because there is no circumstance, really, if things are right with us, where we don't know what we're doing, right? I mean, can you really get to a point where your left hand doesn't know what your right hand is doing? And so if you extend a $100 bill to somebody, your left hand knows nothing about that. There's no recognition at all of that. The left hand could literally say in court, didn't see it, don't know anything about it, don't have a clue. Is that possible? Well, yes and no. We operate in a world where we know what we're doing. What he is saying is, choose to not know what you are doing. You have consciousness about what it is that you're doing. You pull out the money, you give the money, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be money. You know that. It's just doing good generally. Whatever it is, when it is done, you have conscious knowledge of it being done. He's saying, choose to not. Now that, to me, is a very significant thing that serves us well in a lot of other ways. But before we talk about other ways, let's just talk about that a little bit more. Choose to not know what you're doing. You know, we say it a lot of times, there's proverbs that relate to it. What we talk about is what's important to us, right? The words we speak and the things we discuss with people, that's what's important to us. If all we talk about is football, then people know what's important to us. If all we talk about is our work, then people know what's important. If all we talk about is money or career or this or that, people know what's important. The thing we're always talking about is the thing that matters most to us, because it's the thing we're always talking about. The left-hand, right-hand thing is just stop that. Just stop. Don't let that be the thing that's on your mind. Don't let that be the thing that you want to discuss. Put the doing of good out of your mind once it's done. And then it won't be something you talk about. It won't be something you even think about. We won't even be tempted if we can put it out of our minds. That's really what he's after with the left-hand, right-hand thing. Don't think about it. Yes, sir. That's a really good point. Can we get to a point to where we're just that generous and that aware of the needs of others to where it's just not a thing to us? It's just not a thing. People are there regarding their contribution to the Lord's cause, right? It's just a thing that they do. It doesn't mean that they're not invested in it. It doesn't mean they don't care. It's just so automatic to them that they don't sit down and go, okay, let's see here. What are we going to do with this situation, and how can we turn this to our advantage? They just do it as a matter of course. And that's a really good point that Randy brought up. If we are generous to the degree that it is just the way we live, then we're not going to go around looking for some sort of feedback or reward from people because of it. That is really the verse 3, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, because it is just a matter of course and a normal thing for us. We can get to that point in our lives. And when we do, verse 4, so that your giving will be in secret. Now, again, he doesn't mean that you got to go around the corner and through the back alley and come in the back door of a restaurant and go out the side door and then give somebody the cash and sneak back around. That's not what he's saying. You know that. Contextually, it's just you don't have to have people know about it. And when you don't have to have people know about it, who takes note of it? Well, he says in verse 4, your Father who sees what is done in secret. He sees that. The beautiful part of it is when we take care of each other, when we're generous toward each other and other folks, when that is our nature and that is our habit, listen, God never misses it. There is never a time where you treated someone better than they deserved and gave them more than they deserved and God didn't see it. That's awesome. Our Father sees what's done in secret. And then He will reward you. The way to get something for doing something good is to do something good and not make a big deal about it. To Randy's point, to be so accustomed to doing something good that it is just not a thing to you. It is no big deal to you. But know this, it is to God, and He sees it every time. And He will not forget that. That's a part of kingdom character. And for some of us, it's hard. It's just hard for some of us. Okay, let it be hard. We can fix that problem. We don't let our left hand know what our right hand is doing. We don't take note of the good we do. We don't talk about the good we do. We don't bring up the good we do. And if your response to that is, well, I don't have anything to talk about then, fine, that's good too. How about we spend a little time being quiet? Better that than saying things that don't need to be said. And we all know that, don't we, from personal experience? So, we need to learn to hide some things from ourselves. Sounds counterintuitive to Christianity, but we need to learn to hide some things from ourselves. And if it is something good about you, whether it has to do with your generosity or anything, if it's something good about you, hide that from yourself. Don't tell yourself about that. If you're really talented in a particular area, do it. If it serves God, especially do it. That's great, but hide that from yourself. Don't talk to yourself about how good you are, about how much you've accomplished, about how talented you are in a particular area. Don't talk about it. Leave it alone. God knows. And if it's used for His cause, He will reward. We'll take a little break and then we'll begin our Bible classes.